Hello. Good afternoon, portfolio investors and friends. It's so wonderful to be with you this afternoon. And I am so thrilled to have you with us, Julia Cheek of Everlywell.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's such an exciting time to be investing in great companies. And there's no more exciting company right now than Everlywell. So friends out there, most of you know about Everlywell. You're probably meeting Julia here online for the first time. Um, you know, talk about rarefied air. There's very few entrepreneurs that have been able to, found their company and really in 5 years, because I believe you started in 2015 and in 5 years created a company worth over $1 billion. So oftentimes we'll talk about, the first woman or the best woman or in a category, but really we need no other descriptor around this. This is just an amazing feat. And I know you're still in the middle of this great growth and excitement. So we're so thrilled to have you with us. So just a few comments and then we're going to jump right in. Julia here today is with us on the founder's journey. And so what we do is we look at both, what's brought her here. We're going to go a little deeper into her background and how she launched Everlywell, how she's been growing it, as a fabulous company that's really looking to disrupt the whole, laboratory testing space. And then as we're putting our investor hat on and asking her to tell us a little more about the challenges and opportunities that she sees ahead and where she's steering the company. So we're going to go all over those spaces in the next, 40 to 45 minutes. And then we're going to turn it over to you for your Q&A. We have a great group on today and many other investors. As I was telling Julia right before we came on, there are nearly 500 limited partner investors that are really excited about being a part of her journey. And many of you are on today, and it's just a great opportunity to hear the story. So Julia, tell us about how this all started.
Yes. So first, I will just reiterate everything that Trish has said. I am a huge fan of Portfolio. I actually attended an event in Austin back when we had events, and am just really honored to be able to have each of you as well as Portfolio on our cap table in this most recent round. 85% of our customers over the years historically were women. And I think that that is not surprising when we think about women being the healthcare managers of their homes, the discrepancies that we see in care delivered to women. And so I am just really thrilled to be able to have so many of you literally invested in this journey with me, and it means a lot. So with that, I will actually now answer your question, Trish, but just wanted to make sure that that I said that up front. So as you mentioned, I started Everlywell just about 5 years ago in 2015. I was probably the most unlikely of backable founders, and for a long time, I did not act. I was unable to raise money for that reason. I was in a public company role. I had no healthcare experience. I was not a technical founder. I started this business in Dallas, Texas, not the hotbed of venture capital funding or startups. And I went into this building a consumer business in healthcare. And so for a long time, I told a lot of stories that I experienced and that I had friends that had experienced around lab testing and why it was so broken in the US, from inconvenience to not getting results that mattered to you, to getting hit with these bills that were hundreds, if not thousands of dollars that you didn't even know what they were for or why it mattered to your health. And, ultimately, I believed there was this really dramatic shift that would take a number of years, but towards consumers shopping for healthcare because they were going to bear, unfortunately, an increasing burden of cost. And that has proven to be true. And we have been able to serve as a price certain affordable, on-demand digital service for lab testing at home, building to over 30 different tests in most common condition areas that you need to test for, and now partnering across organizations to be able to deliver this incredible user experience directly to people in their homes. So it really started from this personal experience I had with a bad testing experience. And then I built on it from there to be able to grow to where we are today. But certainly in those early days, it was really about this core problem and me really determining if anybody else had this same problem, and how big was this problem and how many people's lives could we change if we solved it.
Mhm. Now, when did you know you even wanted to be an entrepreneur? I mean, was that, was being a founder something that you kind of thought about for many years? I know have a graduate degree in business from Harvard and we're a Baker Scholar. So, I mean, was it something you were looking at, or were you going to go that corporate route and you just ended up moving in this other direction?
Yeah, this is such an interesting dichotomy to present when I talk about this. And I think it's really important to know that no one journey is the right path to entrepreneurship. And I can tell the story in a way that is true. And I'll tell it to you here today, which is I quit my job. I got married in May of 2014. My husband quit his job to become an entrepreneur. So I was the breadwinner. 11 months later, I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur with this random idea that I had in a space I didn't know. I quit my job. We sold our house. We moved into an apartment and we moved to Austin in a U-Haul 6 months later when I raised our seed round. That is all factually true. However, it misses a big part of my journey years before that in having this innate drive to wanting to do something bigger and start a company. And that journey really began in business school. So I had been a pretty big rule follower. My parents are lawyers. I was an A+ student. I was I liked playing by the book. And that was always what drove me. And so I probably am not the profile that you would expect would go out and take these kind of risks. But when I was in business school, I went into HBS in the Great Recession. Most of my classmates had been laid off in the fall of 2008. And we entered business school in the fall of 2009, graduated in 2011. And I was fortunate to have this unbelievable exposure to people like Katrina Lake, and many other impressive entrepreneurs. We had the Rent the Runway founders, Gilt Group, Birchbox. This was all my era in business school. And I'm a firm believer that that is the only reason why I was able to see entrepreneurship as a viable career path for me. And so it really brought this out in me. And so for the next 5 years, while I didn't immediately start a company until 2015, I was always searching for those ideas and problems, and it really reoriented around the fact that if I didn't try this about something that I was really passionate about, that I would really regret it for the rest of my life. So, both of those stories are true. You can tell it in a very dramatic way, but in reality, I think the seeds had been sown a number of years before I actually started Everlywell.
Yes, yes. Well, that's so important to be able to see other people be able to create these great companies that are out there and know that it's possible. Although, your success has just really been, so amazing. But I read an article, Julia, about, as I was, doing a little research, and in it, you talk about your father, even when you were quite young, talking to you about money and investing, and you knew what a 401k was. I mean, that's an experience that a lot of young people or children don't have. It's just that comfort too with money and going out to raise money or even taking any type of risk.
Yeah, I mean, I love that feels unique. My father is a first generation high school graduate, not to mention college and then grad school, and really worked his way up, had a full-time job at the age of 16, left home. And so for him, communicating to me just basic financial management principles, I mean, started when I was 15 years old. I remember sitting down for my first paycheck out of Deloitte Consulting when I was 22, and he sat me down and showed me on paper, a piece of paper of what it looked like to max out my 401k at 22 versus if I started at 35. And none of this was very sophisticated, but I was an only child. He always told me I could do whatever I wanted, and I never had any gender comparisons growing up. I never had any concept that I couldn't be the full kind of owner of my financial destiny. And so I think that that really instilled a lot of very responsible habits for me. And even when starting the company, my husband and I took financial risk that we were comfortable with so that I never felt desperate, because we made the lifestyle changes that we needed to make. Yes, they were hard. Yes, we sold our house, all those things, but it was something that we could do such that we could both pursue these dreams. And I think that that's something, especially for women, that's often not discussed, is how do you think about planning for that? How do you make those choices? And then how do you get really smart about being your own financial owner? And that's how I think it was just ingrained in me really young.
Yes. That's so exciting. So exciting. And it's a lot of what we talk about too, which is, don't too many of us leave way too much money in checking accounts or things like this. We're over cautious, and we can be really smart about, stepping out, whether we're starting our own businesses or we're backing businesses like yours and being a part of that whole, exciting ride to innovate and change. Well, you mentioned earlier that you were not the typical venture-backed entrepreneur, and that made it a little difficult at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about that fundraising process for you in the early days.
Yes, I do want to say it. I always think it's important to caveat. I certainly had it more challenging than others because I am all the reasons I mentioned: non-technical female, was sitting in Texas, no healthcare experience. However, I did have a great benefit that is different than many women, and certainly the fact that I am a white woman and not a woman of color. And so I want to acknowledge that gives me a great advantage even over many other populations. And then secondly, I had a degree from Harvard Business School. So I had the network to be able to go out and raise. And I share that because even with these advantages, it was really hard. And I can only imagine, and I've now backed or I've spoken to and tried to help female founders who have incredible tenacity and ideas, but just don't have those connections and network. And I think that's often the difference between male and female founders raising as well, is that network piece. So, but to your point, nonetheless, it was very difficult. So I learned very quickly that in the very earliest days, it's really not VCs taking the risk, it's angel investors. And so I am forever grateful to, there was a physician doctor who had done very, very well in a private medical business who backed a bunch of diagnostics businesses that took our seed round and led it. He made a decision in 30 minutes. I'm very grateful to an angel investor who's very focused on health and wellness and agriculture, who gave us our first convertible note. And again, I was all about, how do I get one yes? How do I get one yes so that I have capital to keep the business going? And so I was able to have, a convertible note into a priced round, into a convertible note, into a priced round. I mean, this is the reality of how I had to string these deals together to get enough capital to be able to grow. And, just to put a finer point on it, we always hit our metrics. We have never missed a financial plan. We exceeded every possible growth metric that we could have. And I think we really proved a lot of investors wrong. But I share that because even with doing that, it still was really hard. And I think in the last 5 years, I'm hoping it's opened up a bit because it's become trendy, which is good and bad in some ways. But it was challenging in those early days. And I really stayed focused on how do I open that one door? Because that to me was all I needed to do. And I didn't need to be focused on everybody saying no. I needed to find the people that saw the vision and wanted to partner and would say yes.
Mm-hmm. And how did that early growth go? I mean, was it, whereabouts were you in the first couple of years? When did the that first, that you were angel funded for the first couple of years, and, still a small team. And
Yep.
then when did you really start to be able to prove your value proposition and be able to start to scale?
Yeah. So just to cover a little bit more on the angel to VC path and then the corresponding milestones that we were hitting, I had pitched in that period before we had picked up in a U-Haul and moved to Austin. I had pitched a venture fund in Austin that was like an actual venture fund, but then also had some angels around it. And they turned me down. I was the only woman in the room, and they turned me down. They're like, we love this idea, but there's not enough traction. But that VC partner, John Bassett from Next Gen, tracked us, and he ended up coming in and giving me a term sheet and said, I don't care if anybody else gives you money. This is not contingent on anybody else coming in. We're so convicted in this deal because I've never seen any growth numbers like this and you doing more than what you said you would do. But that was 18 months, I think 15 to 18 months after that first pitch. So I share that because building that longevity with investors does really matter and can turn out to be, he was the very first person to say yes, which is a really hard decision. It's really easy once a lot of people have said yes. It's really hard for a VC to be the first one. And so I think that building and just showing success really helped us. So we launched commercially in the summer of 2016, right before TechCrunch Battlefield, with 3 tests. We did about 700,000 in sales that first 7 months of the year, then grew to 6 million, then 20 million, then 45 million. And then in 2020 had just a radically huge sales growth year. So that has been our trajectory. Again, up until even January of 2020, we had about 75 people in the business. We were about a $50 million top line business. I had really raised capital responsibly. So again, until this last round, we had only raised about 70 million and had about 50 million on the balance sheet. And so I think women founders tend to be more conservative and do more with less, and really hit those metrics. And so the growth story, I think, fortunately for us, we never hit. In the moments, there were a lot of hard moments, but the numbers looked pretty smoothed out and how you want them to look for a good story. There were a lot of things that contributed to that were luck. I was on TechCrunch Battlefield as a finalist. I then was scouted for Shark Tank, which then drove that pop in sales the next year, which then drove Humana and CVS. And so you can start to see, looking back, how a lot of these bets that we made ended up connecting the dots towards a growth story. There's probably also 100 other bets that I made that didn't go anywhere, but you just need those few that pay off and then are really able to help contribute to building your traction and your success.
So there's someone's asked, what were those first 3 tests that you developed that became the
first 3 was a women's fertility test, a metabolism test, and our food sensitivity test. And the reason for those was I knew that those were 3 areas that were proven with data that when women went into their doctors, they were ignored around getting tested for these areas, and or if they weren't diagnosed with conditions, these tests would not be covered by insurance and were orders of magnitude of like $800 to $1,200. And so there were really clear value propositions, large total addressable markets, and a price accessibility and control element that I felt was really important to our core audience.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so difficult though to get traction in a consumer market. Mm-hmm. What was your secret? I mean, how were you really able to go in and address the market, especially being you weren't just showered with money? I mean, you had to be really smart and strategic about it.
I did. And, I'm not sure if we were successful because I didn't know any better. And so I set really, really aggressive goals. So then when we didn't, basically I would just say like, well, we should just shut the whole business down because we're not doing whatever, a couple $1 million in sales. That was absurd. Many companies take, 12 to 18 months to really build traction. But it was almost like, because I didn't know, we actually overachieved. But it was really hard. I mean, I went through multiple agencies at the time because I couldn't afford full-time hires, in terms of all of our SEO, our paid advertising, I learned how to do it myself. I oftentimes managed the accounts and customer service myself. And then I hired some strong early employees that really helped us growth hack day after day. And I remember distinctly that kind of summer of 2016 from, I had my volume on my phone set, and I would get an alert anytime a Stripe transaction would come through. And like at first it was like one or two a day. And then it maybe picked up and it was maybe like 5 a day consistently. And then I was with my husband and his parents over 4th of July of 2016. And I remember it got to a point where my husband told me I had to turn it off because it was just going and going, and then it just kept going. And so it's really these very salient moments of predictable. I wanted to get to a point where we could predict our transactions, predict our customer acquisition cost, and then grow, right? And then predict and grow and kind of continue to do that. And look, I think it was probably a little easier to do 5 years ago, to be honest. There's a lot of oversaturation in the kind of the online ad buying market. And now we have scale to overcome that. But I think you would have to find other ways to growth hack today to do what we did 5 years ago. But at the time, there was still a lot of opportunity to grow, even with limited budgets in these buying markets.
You're getting lots of love in the chat, I have to say. So many people that have used your tests and find your platform so easy to use and have been following you for years. And our third largest market is Texas. So there's a lot of Texas love being thrown out here because you're from Texas. You're a native, right? Of Dallas.
Yes, native to Dallas.
So a lot of Texas love going here. So one of the questions that's popped up, and we'll just weave these in and then we'll open it up completely to questions, but wanting to know especially about your lessons learned in identifying and bringing in some top talent at the beginning and how important that was for you.
Yeah, very early on, again, I didn't have a co-founder. I was operating in an area where I clearly didn't have expertise and needed to be sure that I was filling those gaps from technology, building a digital platform, and regulatory, and then the medical and clinical side. So my first hire was a consultant medical director. And then I brought on a third-party engineering and product team. And then after I raised my seed round, I was able to hire our first full-time employees in Austin, which again was like spring of 2016. I got very lucky in a lot of ways with our earliest employees. I had a team at my prior jobs, but I don't think I appreciated what you are looking for in those very first hires. Fortunately, the right people gravitated to me, which were those who had built and scaled startups before. They were high risk taking, high equity, low comp, right? Willing to work 24/7 and really adopt this company as their baby, just like it was mine. And so I sort of decided I would hire 4 people, one in operations, because we also have a demanding physical logistics business and customer experience business, and lab partnerships, et cetera. One in product and growth, one in consumer marketing, and then one is our head of engineering. And so that was really my original plan. And I've learned a lot since those days. And I think it is so hard to be an early stage employee at a high growth company, at a high growth startup, because you as an employee, even, and me as a leader, but especially the employees, I can hire and support myself, right? These employees have to be able to scale and grow themselves into the next job, sometimes every 6 months. And so looking for those skill sets, for resiliency, for flexibility, for comfortable with change, ability to really grow and develop. And I think for me, it doesn't matter if someone's been at a really successful story. for a high growth company. What matters is what their role was in what they were doing. And I think really digging into that is important. We have management presentations that I've had since the very early days that people do to try to understand working dynamic and, also understanding yourself as a leader. I work a lot. I'm very results oriented. I'm very achievement oriented, and I want people on the team that are very much the same way, so that they are satisfied with the work environment and they're really helping us build a great culture. And so being able to know what works for you and what doesn't, and then how to balance your weaknesses as well.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit more about setting culture, because when you're growing as rapidly as you are and your trajectory going forward, how do you establish and maintain that culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fluid thing, especially in this current environment where when Everlywell moved to remote work in March of 2020, we had 70 people or 80 people, and now we have 270. And so the vast majority of employees, including three of my direct reports, I've not met in person. And we really had to adapt and view it as what are the principles that we want people to embody and then to come in and add to the culture. Because the idea that I or that even any amount of the team controls a culture, I think is a recipe for failure. And what we drive towards is transparency from the top. So we communicate more information about the business than you could imagine to all of our employees. We think they are owners in the business. Every single full-time employee has equity. We want them to hold us accountable just like we will them. We want them to know how and why we make decisions and what our financials are. So that drives us is transparency down, and then also transparency up. So raising your hand when you see something, asking the question, questioning why we do something the way that we do it. When you have that many new people, that's the kind of behavior you have to model and reward, because you can't catch every little thing or put rails on every little aspect of your business, or it will fail. So that's a lot of the principles that we're trying to drive now. And regular feedback, lots of ways to get feedback, lots of ways to improve, and then making sure that you act on that. So I didn't even have an HR leader until June of 2020, where I was fortunate to hire a great chief people officer. But that has been just trying to make sure we get the right structures and processes in place with this very high growth has been something that we've tried to move as fast as we can, so that we can both have enough people to do the work and not burn everyone out, but also have a structured work environment that gives people opportunity and helps them understand what their jobs are.
Yeah. Well, let's shift and look at this, tremendous growth that's really here ahead of you.
Yeah.
What are you? Well, let me ask you first. What's keeping you awake at night now?
Yes. Where should I start? No. So what keeps me awake at night now? I think it is really what we just touched on, which is we're hiring another 200 people this year. We have 3 outsourced fulfillment centers, a core team of 200 people remotely, and then a team of 60 in Dallas at our CAP accredited lab. Very different work environments. We have scientists, we have customer care, we have consumer marketers, we have technologists, and really thinking through how are we setting goals and building a culture that is communicated to everyone. I mean, how can I be sure everyone knows what our vision is? How do I do that in a way that it really resonates with people in this remote environment? And how do we think about the workforce of the future when we come out of this? And so that's probably the number one thing that keeps me up, is how do we get the best people and then keep them here? The second thing that keeps me up is how can we continue to offer every possible test that we can to consumers in the home, which means innovation around rapid point of care testing, Everlywell's role in that, offering reimbursement so that our costs of our tests continue to come down. And again, how do we stay focused entirely on this affordability and accessibility mission? And I think if we do that, we will win. Where you can get distracted is when you're in a phase like we are, which is fully unlocked hypergrowth. I mean, far more than we were experiencing before, where we already were in growth. It's very, very easy to get distracted because you have so much demand that you don't even know where to start. And that, I think, is another piece that if we don't make the right choices, and I don't even know that it matters which things we pick, we just have to pick a few things. And so that, I think, is a new environment and culture for us versus having to go out and really create the story around home testing and educate people about it. We certainly don't have to do that anymore. And so now it's about serving customers with that need and making sure that we are tackling things in a very focused way.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question, Julia, about the competitors out there. A couple of that they've mentioned, let's get checked. Are there, and I know, a lot of your movement now has been really on the enterprise side as well. So who are those competitors? How are you comparing yourself to them or defending against their growth?
Yeah, it's so fun for me to get this question. And I share that because do you know what the number one question, probably, okay, I'm 5.5 years in, for at least 4.5 years was, is this really a problem? Is there a market here? Because you're the only one doing it. And so therefore we've all decided this isn't a problem. So I love getting the competitor question because it is such a validation for us of the work that we're doing. And this space is so huge. It is so huge. It is an $80 billion market. There are 13 billion tests run annually before COVID testing. And so we have such an opportunity. I don't want to be the only one telling the story to Americans. It will take a long time, and we don't have that much money to tell 350 million Americans about this amazing opportunity to be able to get tested in a more affordable way from home and with data that they can use with their doctors and have telehealth consults. That concept can be much broader than Everlywell, and there will be many, many winners. We don't think as much about companies like Let's Get Checked or even LabCorp or Quest. We are kind of the definitive consumer brand in this space. What we think about are companies like Amazon and Walmart and CVS and frankly, some of the companies like Roe, companies where they were adjacent to us, squarely adjacent, but now in a post-COVID world, many of these verticals of digital health are now overlapping and converging. And so we need to be sure we're still playing to win as I think new folks come into the space in a way that they weren't before. So that's a lot of what we think about. And ultimately, I'm really excited about it. It is fun for me to be in this position as opposed to the opposite one. So.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see digital health going overall? I mean, what's your predictions over the next, 2 to 3 years? What's going to happen post-COVID? Have we moved really into, a whole different way of thinking about caring for health and not needing to be there face to face?
So I think that certainly, well, let me just start with people will dictate the future of healthcare. They will demand what experience they want to have, and they will dictate how the experience moves forward from here. And so I think what we've seen with telehealth is this unlocking, which was largely enabled by regulatory changes. And then, of course, people not being able to go into the physician's office. This unlocking of telehealth has now shown us that consumers have said they will switch physicians if their doctor doesn't offer this moving forward. And then physicians have seen the benefits of it as well. And so I actually think that was a really critical unlock for Everlywell, because now you have a suite of ancillary services that providers, consumers, health plans are all looking to deliver in the home to make sure that patients are getting the services done that they need. 70% of diagnoses require a form of a lab test. 82 million Americans need to be screened for colon cancer every year. That all can be done in the home for the most part. And so what you've seen is a radical shift around, I think, this ecosystem shifting into the home. Certainly it won't all be in the home. Certainly not every test can be done this way. But I think you will see a majority of healthcare being delivered in new and novel ways. Another interesting impact from this has been the rise of cash pay services. So even, you saw Roe and Hims raising huge rounds. They are only cash pay. They've built to hundreds of millions of dollars in recurring revenue. Even similarly with some of the online prescription pieces, you saw the GoodRx IPO, very similarly a affordability play driven by consumer discounts. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how insurance plays into the future of digital health. And what that interplay looks like as we move towards more demands for price certainty, more demands for affordability for consumers, and just basic shopping behavior that you would expect in a consumer decision-making economy like we see in any other space other than healthcare.
Mm-hmm. So you were on a major growth trajectory before COVID hit. You responded really rapidly and really were able to take the situation and continue to grow and even really push through. Talk a little bit about how, the response, how you were able to, modify or step up with your services. What do you think the challenges or risks are, when COVID comes under control? Just a little bit about, there's a number of questions about COVID and how it's kind of propelled the model and how it can affect you.
Yeah. I love talking about this because externally, the decision to go into COVID testing was communicated as a pivot. And it was poorly understood in the sense I've had a lot of like business school professors and others say, gosh, how did you feel? How did you even decide to make that decision? And I don't at all mean to be flippant about this, but I am very serious when I say it was the easiest decision I've ever made in the entire time I have had a professional career. And the reason I say that is what we saw in the early part of last year was a centralized lab testing model with very limited access to COVID reagents and tests, and hotspots were not able to get testing. And we had a technology that decentralized testing around the US. We had 15 partner labs, and we had the ability to route testing from hotspots that didn't have it to labs that had tons of capacity and no cases. And so in my mind, there was no more obvious way to live into our mission to serve people and to serve Americans than to get into COVID testing. And, I know, Judith Roden is on our board. I mean, these were easy communications with my investors and my board. It's not to say it wasn't risky, but the decision was easy because it was so core to what we do. So I certainly did not anticipate some of what followed. I mean, this was a workforce and a team that worked 24/7 for at least 6 months straight, nights and weekends. We served population struggling with homelessness. We served seniors, we served ER physicians, entire cities, universities, you name it. Now, of course, it has helped propel some of the growth of our business. But I think what's really important here is that if we remove COVID from our business, our core business, our consumer business grew 100 and almost 200% last year. And our loyalty, so these are our loyal repeat customers, grew over 200%, and 3/4 of our test menu experienced well north of 100% growth because behavior has shifted and home testing is something that is known by almost every American now, and it wasn't before. Mm-hmm. And we also did a couple of things. We cut our prices significantly as we vertically integrated. We launched membership models for people to be able to get affordable repeat testing with telemedicine consults, things that really responded to what consumers need. And then we also have a large Medicare testing business, colon cancer, diabetes, kidney disease screening, and those needs to test in the home have only further increased and will remain in the home moving forward. So what it did do for us, I think, is it normalized at-home testing. It shed a light on the broken infrastructure of lab testing in this country that we have known about for years and have been talking about and have been able to respond to and show our value to people. And then it also allowed a lot of people to use the brand in a way that they hadn't before. Our COVID test has an NPS of an 85. I mean, that is unbelievable. And so we're able to get so many more people excited about what we have to offer when they see us help them in this time of need.
Yeah. Wow. A couple of so many questions. I'm going to jump right in here.
Sure.
So another question here is, as the company grew, how did you split your time between fundraising, setting product strategy, and hiring new employees? What learnings did you have in those first 2 to 3 years in these areas?
I would love to tell you, and I do all the things. I mean, I like go through my calendar every quarter and try to be, a mercenary about my time. I go through and do my pie chart of my time. I try to restructure internal cadence of meetings, one-on-ones, all the things, right? I've read them all. Usually it is what's on fire at the moment. What's the thing that I have to solve that no one else can solve? And how can I do 5 jobs at once? And so I don't necessarily want to gloss over that, because I think that is just often the reality of being an early stage hyperscale company. And so, I was fortunate actually after those first rounds that I eked out of fundraising, not to have to spend a tremendous amount of time fundraising after that. I also had a great board. I picked my investors very carefully, and I think that saved me a tremendous amount of time and also brain space of not having to ruminate on problems or board members that were causing issues or things like that. I had a great team that made me better and pushed me around me, and that I think has made a big difference. Again, part of that was luck. Part of that was kind of learning on the go and iterating. I think it's really hard. I mean, as a founder, your job is to keep the business capitalized. You're also running and growing the business and doing every job.
Mhm.
And so I think it is the reality of just doing the best you can with, one day at a time, of what are the things you have to do that day, and really saying no to every other thing. I say no to 75% of the things that come in my inbox. And I have a really rigid prioritization. If it's not related to Everlywell, it probably doesn't happen.
Yes.
That's my priority right now. That's what I owe to our team and to my board and to our customers.
Mhm. It just doesn't stop. It is just relentless every day, isn't it?
Yeah.
A couple of other questions here. One about really your marketing strategies and how they've changed as the business scales, and now because you talk about both needing to focus, but there's such opportunity there, um, both with the strategy and then how you're marketing as you go forward.
I think that what's very interesting is obviously our budgets around marketing have changed. I mean, we used to film product shot videos on a conference room table with like a GoPro, right? No marketing budget whatsoever, no creative budget. We now have agencies, production teams, things like that. Have an incredible chief marketing officer who joined from Pinterest and had been at Trulia before that, who's really brought this brand to life. But what hasn't changed is some of the metrics that really drive successful consumer businesses, which is unit economics, payback, LTV, customer acquisition cost, and being really intellectually honest about those metrics. So like you can present, there's probably 100 ways to calculate customer acquisition cost. Some of them will make you feel very good about your business's ability to scale. Some of them will make you feel very bad. And so you really have to determine how are you going to model out what creates success for your business with this flywheel, because as you start to scale a consumer business, it does not get more cost efficient. If anything, it gets more expensive because you're finding new audiences. You're not getting the low hanging fruit. It takes more education about the product. TV is not as efficient, right, as Facebook. And so you really have to be thoughtful about how you're planning your growth and your scale. So we have always adhered to a 1-to-1 first purchase payback, meaning we are either profitable or break even on first purchase for contribution margin. That has been a defining characteristic for us because it allows us to be really honest about what's working and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
Great example, we're in over 10,000 retail locations. We're national in Target, CVS, Walgreens, and Kroger. That is a lower margin first purchase, but it has no customer acquisition cost. And then customers who use Everlywell tend to come back and purchase digitally through us again because they're then part of our online platform. And so you can start to see how these channels have to be really carefully analyzed from a marketing standpoint, and yet can make a lot of sense for the business in the long term. So I would just recommend really being, first of all, honest about measuring those metrics. I get an email every day about the last day's spend and gross profit to CAC ratio. And so those are things that we just measure really carefully. And it also ensures that nothing ever gets out of control. And that you're able to make very intentional decisions about where you're willing to invest and try things out and have failures, and where you know you need to ensure that you stick to the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. So Julia, there's a number of questions that are coming in about, how doctors, are responding, when you coming in with their labs, and are functional medicine doctors more receptive? Just a number of questions about kind of the whole medical profession and the interaction there.
When we started, I took a little bit of a playbook from 23andMe, which was, I didn't think that hiring like a national sales force to go and convince doctors that they should use this, when we didn't have EMR integration, we didn't have insurance reimbursement, that just felt like a really painful death and slow death to me. And I thought, if I can get enough consumers to use this, eventually they will start taking it to their physicians, because we hope that they do, and using it with them. And eventually physicians are going to have to pay attention. And so that has proven to be the case. Before COVID, in 2019, we knew about 25% of our customers were referred to us through their physician. And we knew about 75% of our customers had physicians that they were working with and took their results to them. We make it really easy to share, et cetera. That is particularly impressive when it's not just a click of a button. It is actually telling your patient, because you don't know how much their insurance is going to bill them for whatever test it is, that they can use our test and then send it forward. It's particularly popular with thyroid management, STI testing, vitamin D, fertility, categories that have very murky coverage. And so it is helpful when physicians can recommend an alternative. That is obviously, our credibility has only been further solidified in 2020 with our FDA authorization, and for COVID, which has had a halo effect on our other tests. We also have a little welcome sheet for physicians when they do get our physician report that says, here's the quality of our testing, here's the laboratories we work with, here's the validation data, all those different pieces. It's signed by our chief medical officer with a special physician outreach. And then we've actually had tremendous demand from providers as we get into the telehealth space, who want to be able to offer at-home testing to their patients. So that's a sales vertical we're just now building out. But we have been fortunate that we've been able to have much of the physician community on board for some time now, but certainly an area we would love to make easier for them.
So Julia, as you know, we're investors in the company as well, and we're all over the country in 46 states now and 16 countries. And a lot of the people that are on this call, I noticed, are in the healthcare field. What can we do to support your growth?
Yes, several things. So first is, we always are looking for great talent. We are Austin based, but for a number of different functions are hiring remotely. And so I would love key clinical research hires, folks in the reimbursement, payer, and provider enterprise sales space. We need several senior finance roles under our CFO. So I would love for any talent referrals for great people that you think could be huge assets to us in this time. Any customer referrals. So we have over 250 enterprise clients now. We serve several of the largest health plans in the US. If there is a need for workplace wellness testing, anything that used to be conducted in the office is now generally moving into the home. We facilitate those programs with proprietary technology tools and digital wrappers for employers to be able to manage. We serve cities, again, payers. And so I think we have a lot of opportunity to help close care gaps, help improve outcomes, and just really substitute for behaviors that were happening before that likely will never come back, or certainly will not come back to that degree. in the workplace. So all of those things would be really helpful, and would love to connect separately with each of you, and appreciate the investment. So.
It's so exciting to be a part of it. And let me just point out that we're in investors in Everlywell through both our current active aging fund and in our Femtech fund. So, and there are still opportunities to be involved with both of those funds. So we are doing final closes, but we're so thrilled to be a part of this. So just any last, as we're kind of looking here, I'm looking at it, some of our so many questions that we've not hit yet. So a number of people are saying, what do we have to look forward here? How do you see the next couple of years of growth going with Everlywell now? And just perfectly, as we ask that question, we see your our common board of directors, Judith Roden. And thank you, Judith. That's how we really got to be a part of the Everlywell investment, is because we do share Judith Roden as a board member.
Well, I'm delighted, and so great to see you and Julia together. I'm so proud of what both of you are accomplishing, and it's really a privilege for me to be on both boards and watch two extraordinary women lead great companies into what I know will be new terrain, high growth, and an amazing future. So it really has been a journey for me that I've enjoyed enormously.
Well, tell us a little bit, just to jump right in there. Now, Judith, you was it a couple of years ago that you got involved with Julia now? And how has it been as a board member on this rocket ship?
Probably
well,
feels
I
like
wish I had heard. I wish I had heard Julia's presentation. But Julia, it's felt like 5 years, but it's really only been a year, right?
Correct.
This is a rocket ship, and it's so extraordinary to be able to see a founder with the kind of vision that Julia has and the capacity to build and lead teams and grow and take opportunity when it comes. I mean, Julia didn't expect COVID. Of course, none of us did. And to turn that into another opportunity for the company, both to show what it could do, how quickly it could respond, the respect that the FDA obviously has for it, and how quickly they were willing to clear their test, and the commitment, which I think is a commitment that all of us as women are feeling, which is to control more elements of our own healthcare. To be able to be tested when we want to be tested, where we want to be tested, to choose those tests, to be able to do it at our convenience rather than be kept waiting for hours in lab settings at exorbitant charges. And I think that was the vision that Julia had. And this is a moment in which that kind of vision and that kind of commitment has really flourished, because those companies and those products that have been able to show us during COVID, not just the COVID testing, but show us how we really can take more control of our own health, how telehealth, among other things, will accelerate, and the opportunity that Everlywell gives for many of the tests to have physician and nutrition consultations, again, in the comfort of your own home, I think is the wave of the future.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Julia,
yes,
we're going to have a big return with this. We're
yes.
excited. What do you see as what do you see as exit strategies?
Well, I think Judith hit the nail on the head, which is Everlywell's mission has never changed since day one, which was to be to provide affordable, accessible testing for all Americans. But it's really shifted to be something bigger, which is to be the trusted brand for consumer health. And that will always be grounded in testing. Testing is such a fundamental part of our healthcare experience and actually getting the care and the answers that we need. But as I mentioned earlier, we really already have such a mandate from consumers with our current brand to be able to do more as people expect more out of their ecosystem of healthcare. So that's really where we're headed. We already offer telehealth with a number of our products, but we want to listen to our consumers. And when they tell us that they want to use Everlywell to be able to close the care loop, we want to provide that to them. We want to be able to work with reimbursement and providers to offer tests for free where we can. Really, again, just taking down the next steps of this mission and staying true to what we have done from the beginning, which is serving the individual in this journey. And so that's really where we're headed. You'll see a number of big moves from us this year, including new tests, new services, new experiences on the platform. And we're really, really excited about the continued growth. We have another very aggressive growth plan for the year. And, you know, in terms of an exit, I have always been very thoughtful and have had a board that has been very aligned that we are building a multi-generational company and one that is incredibly transformative for Americans. And so this has never been for us about when do we exit, but rather what is the next step to give Everlywell the biggest opportunity to make a difference. And so that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like a strategic partnership. It can look like a public company exit. But fundamentally, we were already marching toward profitability. We're marching toward profitability still, and we'll hopefully achieve it this year. And so we want to control our own destiny and, again, be part of whatever path allows us to serve the most people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you two are just such a powerful team and of women, and just a powerful team, you know, overall, to be able to have grown this to, I think the current valuation is $1.3 billion company, a company founded by Julia just 5 years ago now. Such an amazing story. And we're just so appreciative that you've let us be a part of your success story. And we're ready to step up and be a part of that. And there's so many questions coming in. I mean, now we're, you know, over 30 questions we haven't answered yet. But a lot of these are around different ways that people either can add value or thoughts that they have, and we will collect all of these. People are saying, how can I send talent, or how can I send contacts that I have in the, in the corporate world? Send those to us. You can drop those in. We are going to capture all of your comments and questions, and we'll be able to funnel those into Julia's team. So,
excellent.
Yes. Congratulations to you two. Last words of wisdom. Any your pearls out there to leave your fans with that are really here to see your success?
No, I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for the support. And this is how businesses are built, is through networks and support like this. And so I said it in the beginning, I'll say it now. Portfolio has been and will continue to be a great partner, and each of you are owners in this, most of you are owners in this company. And so I'm looking forward to sharing the journey with you. And it has been a really fun ride. It is, Judith will tell you, she has maybe spent more time with me than she anticipated as a board member. But that is why we have the team that we have, is our investors, our partners really, really believe in what we're doing. And I think it makes a difference.
I would say as a last word that Julia is among the most transparent CEOs that I have worked with as a board member. And one of the great pleasures, Julia, of being on this board, and for all of us of being your investors, is the extent to which you really talk about openly what you're doing, what your plans are, how you're thinking. It makes the board an extraordinary experience for those of us who are privileged to serve on your board, but it also makes you, I think, a great leader, and something that we all can take a lesson from, because your staff knows what they need to do. You give them marching orders and room, And I think that's really important. And you've told your investors where you're going. And so thanks to you for all the amazing work that you are doing.
Thank you. Well, hopefully to a brighter 2021 and to continued growth. So I really appreciate it.
To a brighter 2021. Boy, do we all agree. Thank you all for being with us. The lead partners and the two funds are going to go to a private deep dive meeting. But we thank you all for being a part of Portfolia and backing these kind of companies that have the opportunity to shift the world. Thank you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye now.